The Fencibles were British Army regiments raised in the United Kingdom and in the colonies for defence against the threat of invasion during the 7 Years' War, the American War of Independence, the French Revolutionary Wars, the Napoleonic Wars and the War of 1812 in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Usually temporary units, composed of local volunteers, commanded by regular army officers. Their role was, as their name suggests, confined to garrison and patrol duties, freeing the regular army units to perform offensive operations. They had no liability for overseas service. They included naval forces known as River Fencibles, made up of boatmen on the Thames and other southern English towns and cities, as well as sea fencibles, who, among their other duties, manned small commercial vessels converted to coastal defence. British use in chronological order. Highland Fencibles. The Scottish Highlands supplied fencible regiments for most of the second half of the 18th century. The first regiment raised was the Argyll Fencibles in 1759 and the last was the MacLeod Fencibles in 1779. In all, over 20 regiments were created, although they were not all in existence at the same time. Some Highland Fencibles regiments saw action in the Irish Rebellion of 1798, while others performed garrison and policing duties in Britain, Ireland, the Channel Islands and Gibraltar. American Revolutionary War. The Royal Fencible Americans was a loyalist unit raised by the British in Nova Scotia in 1775, that successfully withstood an attack by Patriot forces under Jonathan Eddy at the Battle of Fort Cumberland. Irish Rebellion of 1798. Fencibles were raised for the entirety of the British Isles. In Thomas Flanagan's The Year of the French, Fencibles are raised by Cornwallis and other generals to combat the Irish Rebellion of 1798. French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. Fencible units were raised in the United Kingdom during the early years of the war. This included not only land regiments but also the sea fencibles. By the Peace of Amiens in 1802, all fencible regiments had been disbanded and those members willing to continue serving had been transferred to regular army regiments, though some fencibles were raised again to meet the threat of Napoleon's invasion of England in 1803 to 1805. War of 1812. In the early years of the 19th century, 5 regiments of fencibles were raised in Canada, Newfoundland and New Brunswick, liable for service in North America only. All but one of these regiments saw action in the War of 1812. They were disbanded in 1816, after the end of the war. See also Canadian Regiment of Fencible Infantry. Bombay Fencibles. The Bombay Fencibles were raised in 1799 by the following order of the Bombay Army. A regiment consisting of 2 battalions of natives to be, under the denomination of the Bombay Fencibles, raised from the inhabitants of Bombay, Salsetta, and Karanha, on condition of not being liable to serve out of the said bounds, at the * pay to each private of 5 rupees 2/4 per month, besides clothing, which last they will receive from the Honourable Company. The 5th Battalion of the Maratha Light Infantry was raised in December 1800 from the Bombay Fencibles as the 1st Battalion. The 9th Regiment of Bombay Native Infantry, Malta. The Royal Malta Fencible Regiment was in existence from 1815 to 1861, when it became the Royal Malta Fencible Artillery until 1881. The term fencible was dropped in 1889. New Zealand Wars. In 1847, the Royal New Zealand Fencible Corps were raised and sent to New Zealand for the defence of the early settlers there. They were settled in 4 new outlying villages around Auckland, the capital, at Onehunga, Otahuhu, Panmure, and Hawick, the largest of the 4. About 75 fencibles and their sons took part as militia in the 1860s New Zealand Wars. Standards. Fencible regiments were less effective than regular troops for military duties, with problems of lack of education and disease. The men would take part in inter-regimental brawls and attacks on soldiers. Some regiments of fencibles, however, were noted for exceptional service. American use. A small number of units raised before and during the Civil War used the title Fencibles. Examples include the Texas Fencibles and the Bellefonte Fencibles. A Texas unit called the Panther City Fencibles existed from 1883 to 1898, and a modern Texas State Guard unit has used the name since 1993.